purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
Hi, I'm Don Lawrence. Welcome to Freethought Forum. We're going to ask you today to step back for a moment to think about things that you might not normally think about. We're going to ask you to free your thoughts, to be a free thinker. We want you to step outside of the box, to look at yourself and the way that you consider life, the whole framework and points of reference that you use to consider things, and ask yourself, really ask yourself, where did I learn this, and how much of what I think is shaped by my culture, and is what I think really supported by evidence? Is it rational? Does it make sense? There's so many things that people believe that don't make sense that we just inherited. I mean, it used to be generally accepted that when lightning struck someplace, that the striking of the lightning was some supreme power, some supernatural power had caused that lightning to strike. Of course, today, from a scientific viewpoint, we know what causes lightning and know a lot about the kinds of areas and under what kind of conditions that it strikes. But it used to be considered a sign of supernatural intervention. When Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod back at the end of the 1700s, he was really condemned from pulpits all over the United States and Europe for interfering with acts of God. One of the really strange things about that was that in most towns, the church steeple was the highest point. And even though the lightning was controlled by God, the thing most likely to get destroyed by lightning was the church, because the lightning was always hitting the church steeples. And it really took a brave man to ring the bells. See, what was supposed to happen, I mean, this is how convoluted and how irrational this stuff gets, was that storms were caused by demons in general, so the demons ride in the storms. And so what you're supposed to do when a storm blows up is they were supposed to ring the bell to, let the voice of God scare away the demons. Well, God controls the lightning, but for some reason God would let the lightning hit the bell tower, and so the person ringing the bell got killed. And so it took a brave man to ring a bell during a storm until Benjamin Franklin got them to put lightning rods on church towers. But of course, the religious people saw this as interfering with the power of God, and so he was condemned from pulpits all over Europe and the United States. But the point of that is that people believe such strange things. We believe things because we're taught those things. And part of what religion teaches you is to believe in magic. It teaches you to disconnect your brain and not to see evidence in terms of real evidence that makes sense about things, but to make special arguments and to accept strange beliefs without any real evidence. So what we're going to ask you to do is to start thinking about evidence, to really consider where you got your beliefs, to not be like, we stereotype these people in films, the natives on the islands that are frightened by the volcano and they go running in terror. Of course, we're all smarter than that. Well, no, we're not really smarter than that. If we were one of those natives, if we had been raised as those natives were raised, we would go screaming from the volcano also and believe that it was the act of some supernatural power. And right now, here today in the United States, here in San Antonio, within close driving distance of any one of us, there are people who will tell you that things happen because of supernatural intervention, that the weather changes or people suffer health problems or any number of things because of supernatural intervention, all of which there's no evidence for. There's no evidence that praying for people heals them, or that praying about your fortunes or anything else. I mean, Christians or whomever, or people who pray, are not richer than other people in general. People who take advantage of other people's religious beliefs tend to get richer. I mean, there are televangelists, there are local pastors, there are local preachers who are rich as a result of taking advantage of the superstitions of other people. You only have to look around town to see some of those giant churches with people who live in magnificent homes, because they're basically snake oil salesmen who take advantage of people's superstitions. Well, human beings in general don't want to be at the mercy of nature. And so they want to, people are always trying to figure things out. And so that's the nature of our mind, as we try to figure things out. We keep abstracting to a higher and higher level. We keep looking for causes. And it's possible for what is a constructive or useful characteristic to become dysfunctional or destructive in certain situations. So our tendency to look for causes and to abstract to a higher and higher level, that's useful under some circumstances. In the case of a herd of animals, it's useful for them to group together and to run in certain directions as a group. But if there happens to be a cliff in the way, that normally constructive survival mechanism causes them all to die. There are other examples of constructive or at least survival mechanisms that can become destructive. I remember as a teenager working on a house out in the country, and they had installed the windows in the house. It was still bare inside, and I kept hearing this thump, thump, thump against the window. And I would go and look, and eventually I figured out it was a bird, that when the sun was at a certain angle, this bird could see its reflection in the window, and it would fly against that bird, the reflection that it saw in the window, to fight this other bird for its territory, and it would knock itself silly. Well, this was a normally constructive survival mechanism that would knock this bird out. So the point is that there are constructive survival mechanisms that can cause you harm. And in some cases, the human tendency to analyze, that almost defines humans, our tendency to analyze and to look for causes and to abstract to a higher and higher level, causes us in some cases to have what's a dysfunctional behavior. We keep saying that there is perhaps a higher and higher cause for things that happen in the world. And we come up with a name for this higher and higher cause, and we call it whatever we want to call it. Some people call it God. Some people think that Buddha never taught that he had supernatural powers, and he never taught that he survived after death. But most Buddhists today believe that they survive after death, and that Buddha had supernatural powers. Well, he never taught that, but what the originators or some of the primary figures of a religion taught never stopped their believers from doing something else and making up stories to support that. So the point is that what would normally be a useful behavior, namely analysis and abstraction, becomes dysfunctional in humans when they apply it to religion. Well, there are some other human characteristics that are also unusual and can in some ways be destructive or dysfunctional. And one of them is our desire to incorporate survival techniques into stories. And that's the subject of our program for today, is these stories that people use to pass on what we've learned about how to survive. Some of these stories get wrapped up in myths. Other ones of the stories that are a little more entertaining and sometimes contain within the stories some of our deepest fears, they're called fairy tales. I mean, some fairy tales are absolutely horrendous. I mean, they're gruesome. I mean, children getting baked in ovens, children getting abandoned in the forest by their parents, young people getting tortured, mistreated, abused by their step-parents, all these kinds of things. There can be grains of truth in these, but they also have some very gruesome aspects to them. I mean, kind parents, I think, would be very careful about what kind of fairy tales they told their children if they were truly concerned for their children's psychological welfare. Similarly, parents say they're concerned about their children, for instance, reading the Star Report. Well, the Star Report is small potatoes compared to the Bible. If you ever pick up the Bible and read it to your child, you're going to have to censor it because it has these just really horrible stories in it. But anyway, people want to put these useful techniques, they want to communicate them to other people, so they make up stories. Some of them are legends. Well, some of you may have heard of a movie that's come out recently called Urban Legends. I mean, some of these stories got so fantastic and spread around so much that some movie producer came up with the idea, I'll make a movie on the subject. Well, urban legends have been around for many years in many forms. Technically, they're sometimes also called apocryphal stories. Stories that you can't trace them to any source. Well, they're all over the place. I mean, probably everybody's heard when they were a teenager. You may have heard the story about, I heard it when I was a teenager, that somewhere around here in Texas there was a serial killer, and the guy had a hook, and he specialized in going to lovers' lanes, and he would, he would confront the couple, and he would somehow frighten or disable the guy and use his hook to kill and disfigure the girl, And so there's this couple on Lover's Lane, and here's this couple on Lover's Lane, and of course they're going to make out or whatever, and the girl's nervous, and she tells her boyfriend, I really don't want, I'm afraid of this serial killer, and the boyfriend saying, come on baby, kiss me, and the girl's saying, well, I'm really nervous, and I think I hear something, and the guy eventually loses patience, as all male chauvinist pigs do when women don't submit to them sexually. And so he loses patience and turns on the car and hits the gas and roars off and, drops the girl off and goes home in a huff because, he didn't get what he was after. Well, the next morning he goes out to wash his car, and when he gets around to the passenger side, here's this hook hanging on the door handle, right? And it really happened. I mean, this is true. Trust me, a friend of a friend, when I was a teenager, told me this, right? Well, that's how these stories always go. They're from a friend of a friend, right? And they're not all harmful. My brother told me about a friend of his, a childhood friend of mine, who had a friend. It's always a friend of a friend. And this one was about, a neighbor moved into a new neighborhood. I'll make it short. And so the new neighbors move in, and they put a cage out in the backyard, and there's a big fluffy white rabbit, and they go away for the weekend after only being there 3 days or so. And the old neighbor looks out in the backyard, and there's his big dog dragging a white rabbit around the backyard. And the neighbor is mortified, and they go out and they grab the rabbit, and it's not badly damaged. And, well, I don't know how the dog got over there, and anyway, what am I going to do? Takes the rabbit in. It's not bloody or anything, so, I'll get out of this. Brushes the dirt off, uses a little damp rag on it, gets a blow dryer, blow dries the rabbit, goes and puts it back in the cage. The new neighbor comes home, and the old neighbor sees them walking around outside looking puzzled, looking at the rabbit, and the rabbit looks fine And a little while, the new neighbor comes and knocks on the door. Did you see anything strange around my house this weekend? The old neighbor, not wanting to get caught, buddy of Bill Clinton maybe, doesn't want to get caught. We all deny guilt, right? So the old neighbor said, I didn't see anything strange. Well, so the new neighbor says, the funniest thing happened. I can't figure it out. So said, we had the pet rabbit, said it wasn't feeling too good from the move or something. The morning that we left, we came out, and it was dead in the cage. So we buried it. We came home from a weekend away, and it's back in the cage. I laughed at that story. I never thought to try to trace it down. Turns out, 6 months later, I pick up a copy of Psychology Today. There's an article on urban legends, and here's the white rabbit story. It was my brother's friend's friend. There wasn't any such person. This story's been passed all around the United States, It's a classic. Well, there's a professor that makes, I think he's up in Idaho or Nebraska. His last name is Brunvand. 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 So Professor Brunvand has written, every 2 or 3 years he comes out with a new book. One of them's called The Orphan's Train, I think it is. Another one's called The Mexican Pet. Another one's called Curses Broiled Again. And it's just collections of these stories that live on their own. Well, if you happen to have access to the internet, you can type in the words enclosed in quotes, type in the words urban legends, and you'll find websites full of these stories. I typed some in this morning, and I came up with, I have a handful here of these stories, right? And here's sort of Cabbage Patch Kids death certificates, right? Coleco sent death certificates to children who returned Cabbage Patch dolls. It never happened, right? Cruise uncontrol. Some guy sets the cruise control on his vehicle, RV, and goes in the back to make a sandwich, and he dies because he didn't understand about a cruise control, right? Another one about, this guy who, this atheist professor who drops a piece, he goes for years. Here's an atheist joke, right? This atheist always confronts his students for years and years, this professor, telling them that, there's no proof for God and la-da-da-da-da, and he goes on, and he's just real intimidating and a real, uncivilized character about his atheist beliefs, and he says, if anybody really believes in God, stand up, and he intimidates and nobody ever stands up. Well, finally this student, the hero, after many years, stands up and says, and how he always demonstrates, if you believe in God, make God stop this chalk. And he drops the chalk, and the chalk breaks, and of course gravity works, and so he intimidates a hall full of students. Well, finally one year, a student stands up and says, I believe in God. And the atheist professor, naturally with a sneer on his face, he sneers and he drops the chalk. Well, when he drops it, it hits the front of his coat, and it rolls along the crease of his pants and hits his cuff and rolls off on the floor and across the stage and lays there unbroken. And the professor's mortified, and he goes running out of the hall in shame, and the student stands up and witnesses to all this other 300 students for a half hour about how Jesus has transformed his life and they all ought to be saved. Well, of course, this is a myth. That professor never existed. And that story's been told for years, and if you go to the web under urban legends, you'll find this stuff, okay? There are hundreds of them. I got one told to me the other day. Honestly, my niece came in and told me about a lady who a friend of a friend works in the bank, our friend's mother works in the bank, and a customer came in and told her about someone who went to Brownsville or maybe Laredo, lost her child, told all the guards. 45 minutes later, somebody shows up trying to cross with the child in their arms. The guard accosts them, takes the baby is dead. The baby has been cut open, their internals removed, and the baby stuffed with cocaine and sewn back up. And, the moral is, don't let your kid out of your sight, and aren't drug dealers awful? Well, you can find that urban myth on the net. It's been around for 25 years. It originally started as a flight attendant from Colombia noticed a baby on the plane. Something was wrong. The Miami Post printed it and had to retract it because it had no basis in fact. People want to believe fantastic and sensational things. We have a tendency to believe. And they're passed around. There are computer viruses. Type in virus hoax, virus space hoax, or virus space myth on the web to find out if that piece of email you got really works. Chances are it doesn't. So, today we've talked about people's tendency to believe. Well, one thing that I believe is that it's important for you to think freely. It's important for you to use your brain to break out of the box. So, look for new sources of information and don't believe everything you hear. Be rational, be critical, and you'll be better for it. Come back and be with us again on Freethought Forum. I'd like to speak to you for just a moment about other sources for news and information. A couple of possibilities. One of them that is available right here locally. I'll spell out the name of this magazine. This is Skeptic Magazine. S-K-E-P-T-I-C, Skeptic Magazine. Ask for it at your local Barnes & Noble, and what it does is debunk. It has an ongoing purpose, month after month, of debunking. Actually, I believe it may be a quarterly magazine, but it's published by Caltech University, and it has an ongoing purpose of debunking belief in UFOs and crop circles and miracles and all those other kinds of things. So ask for Skeptic Magazine at your local Barnes & Noble. Another excellent source that if you want to just get started in this whole thing is a book by Carl Sagan called The Demon-Haunted World. You can go down to Barnes & Noble or Borders or any of the local bookstores and ask for The Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan, and he does a wonderful survey of all kinds of strange beliefs and gives you some counter arguments, some ways of thinking and breaking out of the superstition and belief in magic that can cause you to continue in a lot of religious and superstitious beliefs. If you want a good critique of religion, a book available through Prometheus books. Prometheus is a mythical character who stole fire from the gods and brought it to humanity. There's a book service called Prometheus Books, and you can get their number through the 1-800 directory. Prometheus is Prometheus, Prometheus Books. You can call 1-800-information and get their 1-800 number. At any rate, they have a book called The 7 Mighty Blows to Traditional Beliefs. The 7 Mighty Blows to Traditional Beliefs. And this book is by a fellow by the name of Mattil, and it will go through in great detail explaining how archaeology, astronomy, geology, biblical criticism, history in general, just knocks the hell out of traditional religious beliefs. Another excellent book is The Story of B by Daniel Quinn. This book is available at Barnes. Of B by Daniel Quinn. Look it up at Barnes & Noble's. It'll help you break out of your traditional religious ways of seeing the world. A book that I don't have on camera with me right now, I'm sure most of you have heard of Bertrand Russell, the philosopher. And Bertrand Russell, there's a collection, I should say, of his essays called Why I Am Not a Christian. And it's written in what I would call educated university level English with a few philosophical terms thrown in, but it's very straightforward treatment of many of the problems that religion has caused and why, from a logical point of view, it makes no sense to be a Christian. So it's important for you to think for yourself. It's important for you to examine evidence. It's important for you to seek out alternative sources of information. I'd like for you to take that initiative and seek out your own points of information. You've done it by watching Freethought Forum. We'd like to thank you for watching. Come back and be with us again. We enjoy having you and enjoy presenting this kind of information to you. Thanks very much for watching us.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person